There's a lot of good info on shooting expired film, but there are a couple of considerations that I personally found don't absolutely hold true. It's all good basic grounding, most of the advice out there is very good, but there's a few little tweaks that I've found myself as well. One of the things you're going to hear is the basic rule that expired film should be shot with one stop knocked off for every decade. Now this is a 100 ISO film and it expired in 2007, so I should be shooting this as a 50. That's generally good, but there are some considerations. I found that the slower ISO films like 1 and 200 don't deteriorate as quickly as 400, 800, or even 1000. And equally how it's stored is going to play a huge factor. So this, if it's been fridge stored, will still be virtually as good as the day it was fresh, whereas if this has been on a shelf in someone's spare room with the sun falling on it, is going to be really bad. So it's very hard, it's always going to be a gamble. Never shoot anything critical like a wedding using expired film, because you just don't know what it's going to do until you get it back from developing. But also, it's just one of those things where it's not actually any cheaper than fresh film. I don't know what the situation is around the world, but here in the UK I can go to my local Boots chemist and I can buy fresh Fuji 200 Fujicolor, and it's £7.99 a roll. You're going to pay 5 to 6 a roll minimum plus postage to buy expired film, so it really only has merit as an artistic statement. Now I've actually shot one roll of this already. I actually shot it through my Olympus OM20, obviously very iconic camera, so to make sure I don't get mistaken for a hipster, I've got my nice Pink Panther strap on there, and I shot it as a 50 ISO, and it was always at the top end exposure wise, and a couple of shots were slightly overexposed. So I think this film's been really well stored. So what I'm going to do, shooting the next roll, I've set my camera's ISO speed to 100, and I'm going to use the exposure compensation to knock that back. I'm not going to take a complete stop out of it. I'm going to put that back about 2/3 of a stop. This one's in 1/3 of a stop at a time, so I'm going to run this back to 2/3 of a stop, so it's going to be shooting as about a 64. The other option I have is I could set this to an 80 ISO or even a 64 ISO and overexpose just a tiny bit. So actually that's probably a better option. I'm going to shoot it as a 64 with a very slight overexposure, which is going to give me probably about a 75 thereabouts. That seems to feel about right for this camera. So that's how I'm going to compensate for the exposure. And the other thing, of course, is it means that when I shoot at 50 ISO, it's really quite slow, and I was finding that it was restricting me to only the first few f-stops, which on this is sort of 3.5 to 5.6. Shooting it slightly faster, I can now run to 11, 16, 22 as required. But yeah, so as to the camera itself, like I say, it's an Olympus OM20. I was actually fortunate to pick that up for next to nothing. And I found them in camera shops in London for upwards of £149, so good deal on there. Now if you want to shoot an expired film using a point and shoot, you're going to have one slight problem, and that is that a lot of point and shoots like my Pentax Espio rely on the DX code to set the film's ISO. And the DX code, for those that don't know, is these little strips at the bottom here. They have resistance and non-resistance in them. Modern cameras put a current through it, and from which pins return a continuity, then it knows which ISO film it is. Now things like the SBOs and things like the modern point and shoots only really are designed to work with DX coded films. So if I put it in, this is going to shoot only as an ISO 100 film. I have no control. But the SBO 160 doesn't have an exposure compensation either, so you're going to be restricted to only shooting very freshly expired and very recently expired films. Now, that's not a problem, because you could shoot this at 100 ISO and probably be just about okay, but realistically you're going to be looking for something, probably an SLR is the best bet, that's got an exposure compensation and will allow you to shoot that accurately. So all I've got to do now is get it loaded up. I'll put up a few shots of previous shot using this film where you'll see the overexposure. Have a look through some of these shots, see what you think. Did I get it right shooting at about a 75? We won't know for sure when the shots come back from the lab, but see what you think. In the meantime, hit like and subscribe button, and we'll see you in another video.